author, trainer, consultant. Yes, but how about generational expert? That's right, folks. Working with the different generations. My guest today, Margarita Sarmiento, is going to tell us all about it today on the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show. Margarita, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm excited to have you here today, primarily because I've not had a guest on that is an expert in a lot of I know you do more than just this, but you have some exciting endeavors in the world of working with the different generations and shedding light on working and identifying with the different generations in the workforce. And I'm excited to get into all that today.
It definitely keeps popping up these days.
Absolutely. But before we do you have anything for us today?
Oh, yeah. I brought my mug. You told me to bring a mug. And here's my mug. I don't know if you can see it.
I can see it says, I'm Cuban. Okay, we don't do that. Okay, go ahead, read it for me. I love that.
It says, I'm Cuban. We don't do that keep calm thing.
I love that.
My sister bought these for all of us in the family last year for Christmas because it very much represents us.
Okay.
So I am Cuban. A lot of people are surprised to hear that. I was actually born in Cuba, came to this country young, very young, after a stint in South America, Colombia, which is where my sister was born. But yes, we are everything that you think of when you think of the Latino expressive emotion, has to talk with their hands. That's me. So, I do teach emotional intelligence also. So when I say we don't do the calm thing, it's like we can do it when we have to, but why? It makes things more exciting when you don't do the calm thing.
There you go. So tell us, I guess, and you started down that path. Tell us more about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
All right. Well, as I said, I came over to this country when I was pretty young, first grade. We came to Miami from South America. Every Cuban has to live in Miami. It's an unwritten rule. And then the government back then, there were a lot of Cubans in the early 60s landing in Miami. And so they started sending us off to different places. And my family landed in Illinois. And, it was harder for my parents, I think. The weather thing was definitely hard. But, it really taught us to jump into the whole American culture. And, my mom had a doctorate in psychology and a doctorate in education. And so she was all about education and pursuing education. And so early on, I knew that was something that I would do, being in my family. And we landed back in Tampa once my parents knew enough English to move south. Okay. So I came back to Tampa when I was in middle school and high school, and then went to Florida State University when I finished. And my degree is in communications because I figured that was a good rounded degree that I could get into a lot of different areas. My minors are French and Spanish. And then I started in management right away. I graduated from school. I had worked at Busch Gardens. This is something you and I have in common. I had worked at Busch Gardens during summers. And so when I came back after I got my degree, I got a job there in management, in guest relations management, eventually became operations trainer at Busch Gardens.
Yeah.
So definitely we connect on that hospitality theme park thing.
The theme park thing. That's a big deal. Yeah. With me at Disney and Universal, you at Busch Gardens, we experienced, I'm sure, many of the similar things.
I'm going to tell you one thing we did not experience that. I don't know who thought of the idea of having free beer and a theme park in the same location, but from a guest relations standpoint, wasn't always a fun thing to deal with. But definitely did that. And then I left, and I mean, it was corporate, Busch Entertainment, but corporate with the theme parks is a little different than traditional corporate. I moved more into more traditional corporate and went into work with Progressive as a manager. So I left Busch Gardens, went to Progressive as customer service manager. and was there for quite a few years, and then eventually left Progressive and moved into nonprofit management. So, I like to think that I landed where I am today because of two factors. One is I have been laid off 4 times in my life. Two of them I voluntarily got asked for to be part of a layoff, and the other two was totally unexpected. Mm-hmm. But all 4 of those things brought me to the next phase in my life. And the fact that I've worked in a lot of different industries, I've worked with a lot of different industries. The nonprofit I was at for 18 years was a diversity human relations nonprofit, which is where a lot of the generation stuff comes in. Probably from that standpoint, I've been doing more unconscious bias. I've done 65 classes on unconscious bias since May of last year.
Wow.
Because of what's going on in our society today. And generations is definitely the other one, because we have 7 living generations right now, and 5 of them are in the workplace, and that's never happened before. So that's kind of what, it's kind of a little bit of my background. I've touched on a lot of different things, and it's helped me to really be able to connect with people. I'm a connector.
Yeah, it's amazing how, back in the day, I don't want to say the day, but I'd say the show was on maybe in the 80s or so. It was on PBS. It was called Connections. And it was all about how one thing led to, someone stubbed their toe in the 1200 AD, which eventually led to rocket ships. You know? And so when I hear you say, you've been laid off 3 or 4 times, and that made you who you are, I can go back, I can trace this path. I said, well, if this hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened. But then this happened, so this happened, and this, and here we are today talking on Zoom on the HR and Leadership Spotlight show.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of fun. If certain things hadn't happened, you and I wouldn't be here talking today. And it's just amazing how that goes on.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And, I used to have a manager who used to say, if you take your divide a piece of paper in half, and on the bottom half, you write down all the things that have happened in your life that have just been difficult and tough, from a career standpoint or whatever. And on the top, you write all the breaks you've had, all the exciting things that happened. Eventually, all the things on the bottom will move to the top. Okay. Because usually those tough breaks lead to good breaks, or at least put you in a place where maybe you'll take a risk you weren't planning on taking before. I own my own business now. I've had my business for 15, 16 years now. And I would have never chosen to start my own business. Last time I got laid off, I was still thinking about looking for a job, but unfortunately, other bad things were happening. My mother had just been diagnosed with cancer. I was taking care of her. She passed away. I was taking care of my dad. All this happened within 6 months, and I got laid off right then. And I started helping people, connecting. People were calling me, can you do this? Can you do that? To the point that one day a friend of mine said, a very good friend of mine who's an accountant, said to me, you need to stop saying you're unemployed and start saying you're self-employed. And so I fell into my business. And quite frankly, if you had told me when I got laid off that last time that why don't you start your business? I would have been like, no, that's not me. That's not the kind of thing I do. So I think sometimes it does. It pushes us to take risks. It pushes us to really dig in and pull out what we're good at that we don't give ourselves enough credit for sometimes.
So tell us what you're working on now. In fact, 7 generations, 5 in the workplace. Can you give us a quick summary of that? That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. There are 7 living generations now, because towards the end of 2020, a new generation was named, and that is Gen Alpha. They ran out of the alphabet. They had to start over again. So they decided to go Greek. So Gen Alpha is the youngest generation. Alpha. And it starts around 2012, 2013. And why is it important? Because in the workplace, we have 5 generations. And I'll tell you real quickly what they are. But the reason it's so important is because what designates a new generation, what made them say last year, I think it's time to identify a new generation, is that generations are defined by how they connect with one another, your shared experiences. I'm a baby boomer, young baby boomer, but still a baby boomer, and I connect with baby boomers. But what determines a generation is how they receive and deliver information, how they communicate. And when that changes drastically, that's when a new generation is born. So the 5 generations in the workplace, really quickly, the traditionalists, they were dependent on radio and face-to-face and newspapers, but they became comfortable with television and telephone because that's what came in and changed. Baby boomers dependent on television and telephone, but they were comfortable with computers. That's what changed. Gen Alpha, comfortable, dependent on computers, comfortable with personal computers. Sometimes we forget that we weren't able to bring our computers home with us until the 80s.
Right.
So, millennials dependent on personal computers, comfortable with mobile computers. What changed around the time that the Millennial Generation ended was the mobile computers. Now it wasn't just that you could take and call people from anywhere and maybe connect with your email. Now you carry around a computer with you. And Gen Z is dependent on the mobile computer. And, to them, my nieces and nephews, this right here is not a telephone.
Right.
It's a computer. And then the youngest generation, Gen Alpha, was determined. Can you guess what changed communication drastically around the mid 2010s, 2012, 2013?
Had to have been social media. Right?
No, social media has been around. Come on, Facebook.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay.
Okay, let me give you a hint. Okay. You have it and you carry this with you. Some of us have it in our homes. All we need to do is speak things into existence. What is it?
Oh, like like the Alexa, the Google Home, that assistant, things like that. Oh,
artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence.
Gen Z is dependent on the mobile computer, but they are comfortable with artificial intelligence.
Right. So
my niece, that's 12. Absolutely. Yeah. My niece, that's 12. I walk into a room, she's watching something on her iPad. She does not watch TV. This is everything to her. Her tablet and her phone. She's watching something with her headset on. I walk into her room. Carly, your mom called that she's hung up at church and wants me to take you to dance. What time do we need to go? Tia Margie, hold on. And then I hear her say, Siri, what time do I dance? And then she just looks over to me. I'm sure she heard it in her headset. Tia Margie, we need to leave at 3:45. Got it, Carly. And the thing is, that's just second nature to her now.
Right.
She's comfortable with that. Now, here's the thing that I tell HR managers and regular managers all the time. We have a full generation, Gen Z, that's coming into the workplace now. And the Gen Z, the younger Gen Zs are in their early 20s. So, you got 20 to 24 is your Gen Zs there in the workplace right now. The youngest ones are 10. But you got a lot of Gen Zs coming into the workplace. They are going to be bigger than than the millennials, by the way. So they already are worldwide bigger than the millennials. But they're coming in the workplace, and you've got most of your millennials in the workplace that are coming in with a personal assistant. And their personal assistant's name is Siri. It's Alexa. It is Cortana, I think is another one.
Right. Yes.
And your workplace better be prepared to support their personal assistant. Because if it's not, they're not going to last very long. And it's really easy for those of us that are older to say, oh, they're too dependent on that technology. My mom thought the microwave was the thing that was going to go away pretty quickly. And it just doesn't work that way. We either need to get on board and not only acknowledge it, but take advantage of it. These younger employees are coming in not only dependent on this, but they know how to work it.
Yeah.
They don't know any other way. My nieces and nephews do not know how to bank that's not on their phone. They just don't know how. They don't shop if it's not on their tablet or their phone. So Gen Alpha is going to come in dependent on artificial intelligence, and who knows what they're going to be comfortable with, whatever creates the next generation. And I'll tell you one more quick story. I have a friend who has an 18-month-old.
Okay.
18-month-old. So definitely Gen Alpha. She is in her house picking things up, cleaning up around the house. Eva, her baby, was in her bouncy seat. Eva says maybe 4 words: babe, dada, mama, cookie, puppy. Okay, that's about it. And Anna is picking things up to take them into the kitchen, and she hears Eva behind her say, "Alexa, play music."
No.
Because to Eva, the only way she knows for music to play in their house is to speak it into existence. And it would be the equivalent a few years ago of a toddler toddling up to a TV and pushing a button because they watched their parents push the button to make the television come on.
Yeah, right.
And it
right.
is no different. And when Eva gets older, she's not going to have an idea of what to do other than speak things into existence.
Reminds me.
My niece will be driving cars, will learn to drive on cars that drive themselves.
Yeah. It reminds me of a Star Trek and a movie, one of the Star Trek movies, right? And they had gone, the Starship Enterprise had gone back in time, and they were in present day. It was like 1980s, 1990s, and someone says, "Oh, let me get on the computer," or "You need to get on the computer." So the characters in Star Trek, Scotty says, "Computer, computer, computer," and he's like, "Something's wrong with this computer, right? Something's wrong with the computer." And like, Scotty, you can't talk. And this is the 1980s, right? So,
right, you can't talk it.
So I thought that was pretty funny. I thought that was good. So you've written books. You're an author. You're not just a generational expert that speaks to companies. You write books. Tell me about that.
Oh, that's so funny. Yes. I guess I needed to slow down enough. But since I was quarantined, I have a couple of colleagues who have been asking me to collaborate with them. So I did publish an ebook that's only available electronically on managing from the middle. Mm-hmm. It's called Managing Courageously for Middle Managers. I did that book with a colleague of mine who's an expert in nonprofit work. So it is kind of half and half, regular middle management stuff, and talking about personalities, talking about corrective behavior, that sort of stuff. And then also she has a couple of chapters in there about managing boards and, managing up and across and those sorts of things. And then the other one is a collaboration I did with I think there's 6 of us total. And it is called Sparks. It is actually available on Amazon. Electronically and hardback. And It is just it's about success. And what's interesting is the chapter I wrote, my entire family thought it was a joke. But I've learned over time. The chapter I did in Sparks is on managing procrastination.
Oh, okay.
And I will tell you that I procrastinated writing that chapter. So I definitely wrote from experience. But, I think that's something we all need today is workload management, especially from the side of electronics. Yeah. Electronics pulls us to procrastinate so easily. It's passive. Notifications, just, things are going on around us all the time. So those are the 2 books. Sparks is available on Amazon and the management one is on my website.
Wow.
But it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. That's exciting. And now you're moving into, if I understand, a video training class that's available on demand 24/7, and you're building onto that. But let's start with what you've built so far and what you're working on.
Yeah, we have a class on the HR Virtual Academy that is just a working with different generations in the workplace. It is available for people to get credit for taking it. And that's the first one. The second one is going to be managing those generations. And the third part is going to be working with generations from a nonprofit setting, because each generation volunteers differently. They do philanthropy differently. So even from a management or a board perspective, if you're on a nonprofit board, it helps to understand these generations. So it's kind of fun. But it launched, the first one, the one on working across generations, launched yesterday. Was yesterday the first?
Yeah, no. Yeah, so you're a couple days ago.
A couple of days behind. So yeah, no, it launched. It launched on Wednesday. Yeah, today's Friday, Margarita. It launched on Wednesday. So I'm excited about it. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that's exciting. And it's you uh, teaching it, correct? And
Yes.
so they get to see you, they get to hear you, they get to get diagrams. I guess you do a PowerPoint. You
Yes,
walk
it
through,
is a PowerPoint and a lot of stories. I'm
and
a
a lot of
storyteller.
stories.
You
And it's
just heard a couple of
virtual.
them.
It is virtual, available 24/7. Folks, I'll have the link below. And when Margarita said credit, it is good for SHRM credit. So if you have HR certification needs, you can pick up 1.5 credits on that and go from there. Plus,
and I know, Chuck, that I have done classes for SHRM credit before, and some other accreditations, like I know my brother has to be accredited for his accounting, financial analyst stuff. If they are accredited with other accreditation sites, you can submit your certificate.
Yes.
And other ones sometimes will give you, an hour or whatever. So, because sometimes they have to get what they call soft skill that aren't specific to their industry. And so, I always say, try it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because this will, and talking to you offline, I know that this will generate a certificate that they can then present. But if you're SHRM certified, it'll actually have the SHRM certification number on the certificate.
Awesome.
Well, this is great. So before we leave, is there anything else you want to add, maybe about you or for our audience about working with the different generations? And I got to tell you, I'm blown away. I had no idea there was a Gen Alpha. So to know that, I've learned a lot just by hearing you talk about that and how the different generations are decided.
Yeah.
There's actually thought behind that. It's not just someone saying, "Oh, we need a new generation category."
What I always like to say is that, 11 million people, I think, a day are born into the world. And, they eventually start moving into interacting with other people and communicating. And when communication technology is shifting and changing at the same time, when the connection between these people is getting harder to do, and it's actually dividing people rather than connecting them, especially the younger people, then that's about time for a new generation. Because what that says is that communication has the generation has outgrown the communication, and it's time to sit down and say. And, I can't stress it enough. I do, in my business, I do coaching for managers. So I coach managers one-on-one. I also do training, team building, diversity areas, but also leadership and management training. And I can't stress enough how important it is for us to not just be aware of these different generations, but value what they each bring to the workplace. And so since you tend to have a lot of HR people, I will connect HR to this whole generational thing, okay? One of the things that we absolutely know is that Gen Z, who is the youngest in the workplace right now, is going to be the most diversely educated generation in history.
Okay.
Millennials are the most educated, as far as traditional education goes. More millennials went to college. Female millennials graduated from college at higher numbers than male millennials. But the Gen Z is going to be the most diversely educated. They're the ones that are. My niece, who's 14, watches TED Talks. Okay.
Yes.
They watch TED Talks. They watch podcasts. They're on YouTube. My nephew is a sophomore at University of Florida, but he is also taking classes on Udemy. They look at the online academies and pick up classes on things they're interested in. So from an HR standpoint, you want to keep your employees around because they are interested in learning. You have to provide learning opportunities for them. Provide learning, not just for their job. And this is the other thing that you and I both know, the workplace is evolving. It's evolving, and you can't hire someone just for one job and keep them in that job in that company. The millennials were changing jobs about every 2 to 3 years, and the Gen Z is staying a little longer. Gen Alpha even a little longer than that, because Gen Z is fiscally conservative. So they are liberal. They are liberal socially, but they are fiscally conservative.
Wow.
So you need to. They're about staying in a job, but you need to make it exciting for them. You need to make it worth their while. And so, looking at your talent pool, not just by the job they're doing, but by the experiences and skills they have, so you can move those skills around, is going to make HR more valuable. How we look at talent and how we hire talent is going to be huge. And then the other big thing, Gen Z and younger millennials are all about connection. So creating a culture in the company that gives people a positive experience is going to be huge.
Yeah.
They will leave. They will leave if they're not happy.
Yeah. And I just read an article. I don't know if it might have been the Business Journal here in Orlando. And they said that a lot of people want to work from home. They want to work remotely. But your younger workers are okay with working remotely. They like that flexibility, but they also want that come into the office every once in a while to have that experience, to have that ability to still network and get some face time with senior management. And they are preferring the hybrid workers, where a lot of people maybe in that, I would say not older crowd, right? But me, I guess, or in their 40s or 50s or so, they're okay with being completely remote. But the younger folks, they like it, but they want that option.
Yeah. Well, and there's two things you got to look at. One of them is you have to separate the generation from the phase in life. You have people, when you and I both started in companies, we wanted FaceTime too with senior management because we wanted to be recognized for what we did. So that really has to do with your phase in life. When you're first out of college, when you're first in the first 5 or 6 years in your career, that's something you want. But you also need to look and see if the generation has any play on it. And the one thing I will tell you about Gen Z that makes Gen Z very different from the millennials is that Gen Z is definitely about communicating electronically. They will use this to text more than to talk. But when they want to talk, they will not do it on the phone. They will want to do it face to face, because Gen Z is about personal connections. They value personal connections much more than the millennials did, because the millennials were the first one that everything was electronic and they just absorbed that. And, it is all about what you were doing during your formative years. And that's the way my mother wrote letters to all of her sisters in Cuba. Once a week, she wrote each of them a letter and she mailed it until the week before she died. And there were other ways to communicate with Cuba at that time, but she still every week wrote a letter because that was what was ingrained in her. And I could have taught her email. I could have taught her some other things, but you're going to do what's comfortable for you.
Yeah. So, well, I got to tell you, Margarita Sarmiento, author, trainer, workplace generations expert, speaker, national speaker, just so many fascinating things. I've learned so much. I wish we could keep talking forever.
I do too, but thank you for having me.
Well, I'll tell you what, I want you to come back at some point in time and we're going to pick another topic and go down that line, because this is fascinating. You're a great guest for HR and Leadership Spotlight Show. So thank you
so much.
All right. Thank you. And folks, thank you for listening and watching the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe, and stay safe out there, folks. Thank you.